Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the penultimate session in this series of Making of Modern Georgia for this academic year. My name is Salome Tsereteli-Stevens. I'm the president of the Georgian Association in the USA, and it is my distinct pleasure today to welcome our wonderful panel to talk about armies and nations, the role of Georgian military since independence. As you may know, if you've attended our sessions so far, we've covered a long history of Georgia, and now we're talking about the times since independence. And who better to speak with us on this topic than this esteemed panel? So first of all, thank you to everyone for speaking on the panel today, to all of our panelists. Our host today will be Ambassador Shota Gvineria, who is currently at the Baltic Defense College as a defense studies lecturer. He's a non-resident fellow at the Economic Policy Research Center since 2017. Before that, Ambassador Gvineria has been working on various positions in Georgia's public sector, but I want to highlight his service as the Deputy Secretary at the National Security Council of Georgia. And earlier, he was at the foreign policy advisor to the Minister of Defense of Georgia and served as the ambassador of Georgia to the Kingdom of Netherlands. His areas of expertise include a wide range of important topics such as hybrid warfare, cyber defense policy, Russia's foreign security policy, Black Sea security, and Eastern Partnership region, he will be hosting our panel discussion today, and he will introduce our guests. So thank you all again for joining, and the participants can ask questions, attendees can ask questions in the Q&A, and this recording will be posted on YouTube, so if you missed part of it, you're welcome to jump back in. So Ambassador Gvineria, over to you, and thank you again for hosting us today.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. And thank you for putting this together, and everybody, the organizing team, for giving us the opportunity to discuss this very important topic. Well, I will briefly introduce the speakers for today before I try to shape the main outlines of the content of the discussions that we're going to have today. My great pleasure to introduce Tinatin Khidasheli. Salome mentioned that I was a foreign policy advisor to the defense minister, and you're looking at the very defense minister that I was advising on foreign policy too. But Tina, I think, is a very remarkable figure because she had a very distinguished career in law, in politics. Then she worked in the public service and now she's in civil society. She has a really all-round experience and knowledge on the topics that we're going to cover today. And so is Giorgi Shaishmelashvili, my good friend and colleague at the Ministry of Defense. He came to the Ministry of Defense with political background, and he was in the public service, and now again he's in academia and civil society, working on the issues very close to defense and security and foreign policy. We are also both proud alumni of the National Defense University in Washington, D.C., which is a remarkable achievement in anybody's career. So we're really well equipped with the knowledge and expertise to cover the topic for today: armies and nations, the role of the Georgian military since independence. So I was thinking about, proper framing for this discussion, and I was wondering how much of the past versus the present and the future we have to be talking about, because Georgia, and anybody who knows Georgia knows that Georgia's history and identity is very much linked to the defense and fight for survival. So we are warriors by nature, but not because this is a choice choice of any particular leader of Georgia at any particular point in time, but because simply we were always in the position of defending ourselves from disproportionately larger military and political powers that were trying to take over what we now see as an important link in connectivity between various Eastern and Western geographies and Northern and Southern geographies. So this uh, crossroads, being at the center of the crossroads, is a blessing and the curse at the same time. It's blessing because it opens up a lot of opportunities, but it's a curse because everybody wants to have control over it, and you have to defend yourself, and you're not always in the best position to do so, being a small nation. So I would say if there is anything that defines Georgian identity, if I could single out one thing, I would say it's fight for freedom. And this is something that basically I, as a Georgian, feel like is best enshrined in my DNA. Having said this, today we're not in the best position in that regard, because I think that we as a nation should be in much better place in identifying and defending our national interests than we do right now. I mean, the whole nation and the separate components of it. But we will uncover all this gradually during the discussion. So I don't want to make this introduction too long. I will not take any more of the time. I will just leave you with a thought that is very important, I think, in framing this discussion today, because the ongoing war in Ukraine has taught us many lessons. But if there is the big takeaway from the military perspective and in terms of, the lessons for armies and nations, it is that today's warfare has changed beyond recognition. It's now an all of a society affair. Military has lost monopoly on contemporary warfare. Military is not the only or even the most important aspect of contemporary warfare, what we are looking at now. And what we have also learned is that all the wars from now on are asymmetric. And military superiority, and especially conventional military advantage, does not necessarily lead to the victory on the battlefield. And that's what we see in Ukraine, because Russia is much, greater in numbers and in the equipment and the capabilities, but it didn't translate in the battlefield victories. So, and the same we see in Iran, and we have seen this in many other places. So what does it tell us in the context of the small nations, small countries with limited resources like Georgia? With this question, I want to give the floor to Tinatin for her opening remarks, and then we will turn this into the discussion, and then we will follow up with the Q&A. Tina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shota. Good afternoon, everybody. I guess it's afternoon, right? In the US, at least. We are all three in very different time zones, so it's good morning and good afternoon and good evening at different places of the world. I will try also to be rather brief and sort of summarize Georgia's military after the independence, where we were, what we did, how did we get here, and obviously starting with the fact that in 1991, after the Declaration of Independence, Georgia was not type of a country that inherited necessarily any military power or institutional capacity or capabilities necessary for building modern armies. Country was deep in crisis, including in many different ways, and including on the issues that we are discussing today. There were paramilitary formations running all over the country. We have very politicized armies in plural, because there were different political parties had their own armed units. Non-existing civilian control, very poor logistics or maintenance. There was no vision. Not only there was no state of affairs, but there was no vision of the type of army Georgia was planning to build or have for its defense. There was very limited professional education, mostly inherited from the Soviet Union, based on Soviet era doctrines that were absolutely unsuited for the Georgia's needs as of an independent country. This was the reality 35 years ago. And when we look back, it was not actually that long ago. Yes, we have a feeling that the whole life passed, and we should have been in a completely different place now, but at the same time, this is the inheritance that we need to remember we are coming from. The military, mostly at that time, was shaped not through the institutional building or any particular reforms announced and implemented by the governments, but mostly during the internal conflicts and war with Russia. This was underlying factor and the underlying design as well of the Georgian military at that time. The real transformation actually began in early 2000s, and Georgia-US cooperation might be one of those significant moments that shaped the way Georgia military is today. Train and equip program, various programs run being on bilateral Georgia-US cooperation schemes or under the NATO umbrella, where the most important institutional setups Georgian military had in the beginning of 2000s that helped us to develop the modern troops, that helped to have a mission planning, at least understanding of the way we were going to, and as well as logistic systems and the entire support mechanism that military needs. NATO capability procedures became one of those defining characters for any reforms implemented in Georgia starting from 2000. Interoperability with NATO and compatibility of our troops with the NATO troops was kind of defining factor for the entire dynamics. But again, there was like in 90s when Georgia military was mostly defined by the internal conflicts and the war with Russia and was building in small pieces at the battlefield. Starting from 2000s, we've got another segment that dominated the institutional setup of the Georgia military, and that was our missions, our participation into international missions, being it in Kosovo, which was pretty limited and very smaller in numbers and importance as well, I would say, but still it was a starting point, and because of that, it gained its important place in building Georgian military. So we've got, for the first time, involved in multinational command structures. Georgian military actually got introduced to the way how the peacekeeping operations work, how the engagement, civil military engagement works, how the modern Western military infrastructure and institutional setup is organized. But after that, in 2008, Iraq mission started, which was obviously way bigger. Georgia was third largest contributor of forces at a certain point in Iraq, with roughly 2,000 personnel deployed, and it became a very significant pillar for development of Georgia's military capabilities, as well as starting building on the reputation of a Georgian army internationally, that is one of the most important and most significant and valuable factors defining Georgia's foreign policy and the Georgian state as such, even up until now, regardless of all the troubles and all the problems Georgia goes today. Afghanistan, that's probably defining moment for something very important. Georgia was, regardless of the Iraq mission, Georgia was still considered mostly as a security consumer country. Again, regardless of a big mission in Iraq and regardless of our part, the part that Georgia played in that mission, still it was mostly a security consumer nation. And probably Afghanistan mission was one of the first that defined us as a security provider that moved Georgia's ambitions to a completely different level and also showed the desire, willingness, readiness on the side of the Georgian state to be much more than constantly asking for help, asking for support, asking for others to stand with us. So Georgia raised its voice as well by being the second, in this case, largest contributor of troops after the United States. And not only amongst the non-NATO countries, but amongst all countries participating in Afghanistan mission. So we've learned and we've went through a very long process of during this mission of battalion level readiness to small unit leadership to intelligence integration. There were missions implemented for the medical evacuation procedures, joint operational planning, logistics, lots of the in the field operations that otherwise probably would have never happened in a training fields for the Georgian army. Strategic benefits of Afghanistan participation was there. It was absolutely undisputable, both in terms of getting more professional army and more integration into the international structures and international systems. So important for Georgia. But to finish this sort of small story of the Georgia's international participation in international missions and how we got here from day one of Georgia's independence, probably we need to also articulate that there was a strategic limitation to structuring Georgia's military development in this way, structuring it mostly alongside the missions and structuring our international cooperation also alongside the missions. Because the critical problem that Georgia faced starting from 90s and then at the end in 2008 Russia-Georgia war obviously was still there, that it was not preparing the country for the defense operations that country needed so much. It was not enough for preparing to large-scale territorial defense needs that we had. And bringing Georgian forces, for example, from Iraq in 2008 was also proof of it, that there was a shortage of experience, shortage of knowledge. There was a desire, there was a willingness of fight. People were, all the people, not only militaries, but the entire country was ready for fight. But there was lot missing, for victory, so much needed for Georgia. So this is why probably in 2016 it was so crucial and important that we moved a step ahead, and Georgia-US bilateral military agreement that was concluded in 2016 was 100% concentrated on training for the domestic purposes, for the Georgia's territorial defense purposes. So that was a level up for actual needs and also deficiencies of the Georgian military. This is where I've stopped. So after that, I do not really know in details what is happening right now. And I believe that in the course of this webinar, we will have a possibility to discuss the current state of affairs as well. But just to summarize what we have now, or what we had up until 2022, it will be safer to put it this way. That is this very strong bilateral ties with the United States, very deep interoperability with NATO, and also very strong cooperation with NATO. A defense posture that was designed specifically for Georgia's geography and threat environment because of the 2016 treaty, bilateral treaty with the United States. We have a very strong active force, about 26,000 Georgian militaries who went through a combat level battles in different missions outside Georgia, as well as a big majority participating in 2008 war. But obviously, there is room for way more, starting from air defense systems to civil resilience, whole of society readiness, and basically non-existent reserve force, which is another very big problem for the Georgian military. So I will stop here, and yeah, looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you, Tina, very much. And I think you finished off with a very important point, which I also wanted to ask Giorgi later on. So I will just pass the floor to Giorgi with this question, about how well tailored do you think this foreign military assistance was for Georgia's needs, and how did you see from the inside the transformation process from building expeditionary army that could participate in foreign missions to the territorial defense, and what was the shift about and what were the stages, because I know you have done deep research on this topic.
Yes, thank you, Shota. I have a prepared presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. It's a particular pleasure to be with my former colleagues, and Tina is my, I would say, so the boss even today somehow. Thank you again. When it comes to Georgian armed forces and society, yeah, so the origins, and Tina has already mentioned this, where like it was, that we almost, after we gained independence, and at the same time we had two wars in the countries. Some may say that those wars were, I don't know, low intensity wars, but still there were wars, which means that for the people who stood at that time of the origins of this institution, they faced two competing, let's say, tasks. On the one hand, they have to fight and they have to continue wars or to fight the wars, and at the same time, they have to build institution from the scratch, because as Tina has rightfully mentioned, unlike some other nations in post-Soviet space or in the Soviet Union, we did not have enough knowledge and experience. Even we did not inherit it. I don't know, some generals, for example, from the Soviet army, let's say, which is very important to if you compare this to, for example, to Ukraine, for example. Because of that, I love this expression. I'm comparing the creation of Georgia's defense institution as an, I don't know, repairing a ship in an old open sea, let's say. Yeah, so the Georgian army was built, of course, by Georgian patriots, but as you asked, Shota, and rightfully mentioned, I think the modern Georgian defense forces is largely defined and shaped by U.S. security assistance. Yeah, we can talk about some other countries, some other bilateral cooperation that we had with different countries, including NATO's, of course, role was very important. But you cannot compare this to the things that U.S. did in Georgia with regard to the defense institution building. So to make our discussion just more engaging, I structured my presentation not as a historical overview, but somehow to talk about some type of paradoxes. We can call them, I don't know, logical inconsistencies. One of them you have already mentioned, Shota. For example, that we are historically, our strategic culture was fight war, small nation at the crossroads, as you have mentioned, etc., etc. But despite this, and this is my first, let's say, paradox that I'm going to cover here, is that and including the current Georgian state, we had four different type of conflicts, so one major war, three low intensity conflicts. But despite all of this, Georgian military has never become a priority institution for the Georgia's political class. And you may ask, and this paradox becomes, I don't know, more striking if we consider the fact that at the same time, this institution is one of the most trusted institutions according to the national polls we are conducting in the country, or we did conduct, because you know that now even polls are not conducted in this country because of the restrictions related to different types of repressive laws. But we can explain this paradox if you look at the civil-military equilibrium or civil-military relations logic or formula in this country, which is somehow is based on the Soviet experience, and this is important to note. Maybe nothing is more Soviet or post-Soviet at the moment in this country as civil-military relations. Because Soviets, they did not trust officers corps. At the same time, we have to mention, and Tina has mentioned in her presentation, is that the trauma of the military coups also works. Trauma of military coup works, even though today's political class they don't even remember the coup. This understanding that military can do something like this, they feel. And of course, lost wars. So if you compare for example, the influence of officers to Georgian officers on the political process, and to compare this to Armenian experience, for example, you will find out Armenian experience before Pashinyan, before revolution, let's say. You will find out that they were much more influential at that time, once they were the fighters of the victorious army, let's say, or officers of the victorious army. And another important issue, and we have to also mention this, that fortunately, not unfortunately, Georgian politicians, they know that they cannot use army or officers in the struggle for the maintained power, because constitution restricts this or bans this. And at the same time, they realize that those officers are people who can still, even though they are under very strict control, they can make some type of independent decisions, let's say. So to use this Huntingtonian, let's say, formula, this means that in our case, we have typical subjective control, which is based on, I don't know, promoting loyal officers, maintaining political control on military through the security apparatus, which is state security service at the moment in our country, and plus do some type of social things for them. To social insurances, increase salaries, etc., to gain some type of loyalty from military. The second paradox, and we can move. Second slide. Yeah, this is the fact that we are a warrior society. We have tactically very skilled soldiers, but a weak defense institution. And the paradigm that I have mentioned earlier, this was challenged somehow after the United States started its security assistance to Georgia. As Tina has mentioned, it started in 2002. in the context of global terror and war. And from that point onward, the United States has provided almost, continuous support to Georgia's defense institution until 2024. As a result, Georgia developed one of the most tactically capable and armed forces in the region. Georgian troops, they carried out very difficult operations, especially in Afghanistan. And at the same time, Georgian armed forces demonstrated very remarkable effectiveness at the tactical level again in the war in the August war 2008, and almost in all close combats, they prevailed Russian armed forces at that time. And at the same time, you can see the Georgian fighters in Ukraine how they fight there, which means again that Georgians are good fighters, but when it comes to institutions, unfortunately, it's difficult for us to build sustainable institutions. Especially problematic and challenging area of this institution is command and control staff, logistics, and Tina has mentioned this already, which is again somehow could be understood, so that we can understand all this stuff through the context of this civil-military equilibrium, as I said. Yeah, so when it comes to Afghanistan, in my view, and Tina already told about that, I think that we can compare the Afghanistan case, so what Georgians did at that time. We can compare this to the moment when strategic pipelines crossed our country. Because through the Afghanistan, we gained, I mean, as a country, a very important seat on the table, geopolitical table. And Georgian politicians at that time, they understood this, and they realized that they can see Georgian army as an instrument of foreign policy rather than the institute that can defend its own territorial its own territory. Next slide. So in those slides now, you can see, next slide, please. Yeah, so this slide, actually those slides that I have here now, they are designed for the US audience. I was thinking so that, yeah, it will be important to US citizens to look what they did as a taxpayers for Georgia. But now we have a situation that you have to explain this, unfortunately, to Georgians because of the Russian-style propaganda that they hear almost every day in our country. But here you can see just numbers. And the next slide. Yeah, so as you see, the U.S. security assistance, it covered almost all the levels of the armed forces of Georgia. The next slide again. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is not important now. Yeah, and the paradox number 3 that is happening now in the context of especially after when war started in Ukraine. Some may say that this is not a paradox. This is just I don't know, logic of regime and its survival. But why I'm saying that this is a paradox? Because in the context of when war started in Ukraine, we missed opportunity to change, let's say, our strategic culture because there was a social demand or demand in the society to increase defense budget and to start real building of our territorial defense, that the defense institution that will be able to defend its own territory. And as Tina has mentioned, in 2016, we had this opportunity when GDRP, Georgian Defense and Readiness Program, has started. Unfortunately, at that time, so when GDRP actually, I don't know, when all Georgian infantry battalions, they got this education and training from the US. Unfortunately, Georgian Defense Institution was not able to maintain those battalions because of the scarcity of resources. And when war started in Ukraine, this was a moment for the political class that could, I don't know, bargain effectively with society to increase defense budget. But they did almost everything in other way around. That you can see on my last slide, just current defense budget of Georgia. As you see here, uh, it's 1.7% of GDP, which is just nothing. You can see here also numbers of the Azerbaijan and Armenia. I'm not talking about the fact that NATO itself increased this threshold from 2% up to 5%. So why I decided to just show, I think that the defense budget is the most, I don't know how to say, the most profound, obvious indicator that we are now not doing our homework in a proper way, let's say. There are, of course, some other things that is happening at the moment in our defense institution, and the most important thing, together with the defense budget or reducing the defense budget, is of course the fact that we almost stopped all type of cooperation with our partners, including the United States. There is still some type of selective engagement from the US side, and they are trying to maintain their presence in the Ministry of Defense, but it becomes difficult and difficult. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Giorgi, and both Tina and Giorgi for this wonderful introduction, for mapping out the key main aspects. Now we will have a little bit of discussion among ourselves before we open it to the audience. But I would encourage anybody with a question to start asking those questions in the Q&A function that you see in front of you on the screen. And then I'll make sure that all the questions will be reflected and addressed in the discussion that we have ahead of us. So my first question would be to Tina. Tina, I am really curious if you have any information about the current state of affairs in the armed forces, because we have been hearing that many officers and soldiers that have had Western education and experience in the missions that you described have been leaving the system and the country. It is especially important question in the format of these discussions because many people in the audience are Georgians that live abroad outside the country. So I was wondering, where are these people now? Because this is a gold mine, not only for the Georgian armed forces, but Georgian society. These are the best people who actually took responsibility for representing Georgia in international arena, at the expense of their lives and health. And we don't see these people very actively involved in Georgia's affairs right now. So what do you think about this whole thing?
Yeah, well, I don't think that there is a much difference between what's happening at the MOD and rest of the public service. Yes, it is more painful when people who actually fought for country's independence, physically fought for the independence of Georgia, who contributed to various missions on behalf of Georgia, who carried Georgia's flag all over the world proudly, are leaving not only the state government institutions, but also the country. But again, the same problem we face is with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The same problem we face is with the Ministry of Justice or any other institution for that matter. People, Western educated, or let's put it this way, well educated professionals who became part of the system over the years due to meritocracy rules implemented in the country, not because of being somebody's friend or somebody's relative, but for their own achievements, for their own professionalism, and who carried Georgia on their shoulders over the years. Most of them are either already gone or under different types of prosecutions and persecutions by the Georgian Dream government. And it's not the friendliest country today to any kind of professionals you can imagine. So I've heard lots of stories. I've heard lots of jokes. I was told many times when I come to the US that, oh, Madam Minister, do you want you to have an army meeting you at the airport? Because there are so many soldiers and officers that you knew when you were minister now living in the United States. And yeah, we might joke about it, but at the same time, of course, it's a tragedy because this is the generation who should be in charge of the country right now, today, who has professionalism, who has devotion, who proved to be committed to the cause, but unfortunately was sidelined and then persecuted and prosecuted and are more and more leaving the country with the hope of better times to come.
Yeah, I would really emphasize what you just said by adding that with all due respect to all the professions, raising a military officer up to the colonel's level, it takes hundreds of thousands and years, and you never learn your battlefield experience in any book or university. This is something that happened to you in your lifetime, and that's the best, let's say, strongest background for the people in the armed forces. And these are the people that we basically have lost from our system. These are the people who, after their retirement, were supposed to build those structures which Giorgi referred to, which have never been duly respected or invested in Georgia. So my question, Giorgi, to you would be that nexus between this societal and the civil military relations. If we look at the best experiences of the small countries, it's either the mandatory military service or voluntary military or paramilitary structures or reserve forces or any combination of all these three that mainly drives the defense forces and defense policy planning in the countries like Georgia, with limited resources and outsized threat. In Georgia's case, that has never been the case. So why do you think we never gotten to the point of maturity where the society and the political spectrum would basically sit down and make an agreement that for the best defense of the national interests of this country, we need to have a strong military backbone that can defend physically, against the threats that we're facing in the part of the world where we are. What do you think was the main trigger to that paradox, if you may, as you have put it?
Thank you, Shota. Before that, I'd like to also add what you have already mentioned. I mean, you said that to rise the colonel, it takes time, resources, etc., etc. Plus, I agree with Tina that in a proportional logic, I am sure that there is the same type of situation in other ministries. But in an absolute numbers, once the MOD was the institution that had, I don't know, huge support from the United States and some other countries also that finance the education of our soldiers, officers, and including all the staff. In an absolute numbers, I'm sure that the situation in MOD is much worse than in other agencies. And if there is I don't know if it is possible. I have this on my slide that IMED, which is International Military Education and Training Program, financed by the DoD, executed by State Department. They gave Georgia $2 million per year for just financing the education of Georgian officers and civilians. Here we have this IMED, the last source, International Military Education, and it's yeah. And regarding the question, force multipliers. This means the problem here again is our attitude towards military. I mean, we unfortunately, even though in our strategic culture, once we were a small nation, I'm sure that the citizen soldiers concept, let's say, one day you are, I don't know, citizen, and tomorrow you have to have an opportunity to, I don't know, go and fight for your country. This was kind of very natural thing for our historical background, but after the Soviet Union, I would say so, we have lost this strategic culture. And unfortunately, Ministry of Defense, first of all, and we were not able to find proper bridges between the officers and civilians. And one of the, I don't know, most appropriate bridges, of course, is mandatory service. But we had the mandatory service that somehow even more, how to say, alienate this youth from the military. And because of that, Tina made very unpopular at that time decision to just halt the draft in the military. But of course, once we are at the moment looking the experiences of I don't know, Baltic states, especially Nordic states, they call this concept, total defense or comprehensive defense or integrated defense or whatever we will call this. It is a professional force structure plus some force multipliers. It could be a mandatory service, it could be a reserve system, it could be volunteers, like it is, for example, in Estonia. But it's a Ministry of Defense responsibility to establish this type of bridges that will make easy for young Georgian, for example, IT guy, to at the same time find his place in a national defense, and at the same time maintain and keep his job in a bank system, for example.
And there is also this rich experience, for example, in the Baltic states, of the voluntary organizations that are organized completely by the society, like the Riflemen's Union or the earlier history in Estonia, you had the Forest Brothers, there's different types of organizing the local level defenses in case of the need. But I basically have not seen those attempts, neither from the political side nor from the society side, in a structured way. And I would wish that this process should start somewhere, but I don't see any signs of that. Do you see any signs of that happening anytime soon?
By the way, Tina started supporting those organizations. We have two this type of organization, Legioni and IC. And then Ministry of Defense, they actually continue, and they even created special unit within the Ministry of Defense to support those organizations. But do you know what happened after this context, when government decided to I don't know, capture the state? They are using those this newly established institution within the Ministry of Defense to control those organizations, which are volunteers actually.
Oh, yeah. Tina, you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that case that we actually had a very good initiatives of by youth at that time, and we've supported as much as we could. And yes, it was carried on by the ministry after I left as well. But at the same time, I'll be very cautious about this idea because we are very fresh out of those voluntary paramilitaries. Running the country, and it does not necessarily bring the most positive memories.
You mean Pedrioni and
Right, I
other?
mean Pedrioni and all kinds of riflemen, as you've said, associations all over Georgia in different, like every neighborhood had one, and at, at one point, we should all recognize that at that moment, when there was no military total absence of the institutional structured force, people somehow felt it important to organize themselves, and there was a war going on in Abkhazia and go and fight. And it was kind of a proof of the spirit of Georgians to fight for their home. But in the end of the day, we all remember how those stories ended up. Unfortunately, those very in most of the cases, very enthusiastic initiatives of young, motivated Georgians to fight for their country, turning into the criminal organizations, basically robbing and killing, and involved in all sorts of crimes. So, but again. There is so much the government can do if there is wish and if there is desire to do it. Because when I made that decision about not bringing conscripts to the military, it was not like the spontaneous decision that one morning I woke up and I said, "Okay, we don't need to do it anymore." No, the whole system is. Designed for those young people basically hating everything about serving in those military units rather than being enthusiastic and being engaged and being motivated in defending their country. Because the way it is presented and it is done in Georgia is kind of a slavery and nothing else. I always called it a modern day slavery, and I still keep calling it modern day slavery because it has nothing to do with the defense or with the military even. This is basically using young people for some very strange purposes, very far from defending the country's interests. While obviously there is so much knowledge and so much experience all over the world, or we can come up ourselves with those ideas and initiatives. Oh, it's a small country. It's only 4.5 million people. And there is no way we can have enough military force, organized military force ever to
Professional
fight Russia,
military army, yeah.
right? But obviously, with all the capabilities available today and all the technologies and all the opportunities out there, if we decide to do so, there is so much potential because the most important component is present. People are ready to fight for their country. This is the most important. Georgians do not give up. They just need to be organized in a most effective way. And that's the only role government has. Not running after us, not repressing the people, not fighting freedom of speech or freedom of expression, but organizing state affairs, institutionalizing those good, positive initiatives coming out of the people and turning it into the positive energy for the support of the independence and sovereignty of the country.
Yeah. So there is one question which goes alongside with the question that I asked, why haven't we learned lessons from the other small states? And now as we speak, there is an open book of contemporary warfare, unfortunately, around us in the region, with the Black Sea region, and the war in Ukraine, and with the Karabakh war in between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which literally writes the contemporary history of warfare, the drones, the technologies. We see how smaller countries can compensate for their military conventional disadvantages against bigger armies through using that technology and innovative know-hows. Do you have any indication that Georgia and Georgia's armed forces is learning any lessons from those instances of warfare that are happening around us? That's one of the questions from the audience.
We can only hope, I think. I don't know, Giorgi probably has more information than I do as to day-to-day activities, but we can only hope. But unfortunately, what we see, there is so little.
There's no indication of that, right?
Right, and there is so little transparency and so little information coming out of the Ministry of Defense. If you don't search really deep, time to time, you just forget that it even exists. And I don't think we have a comfort of having military defense, security issues, concerns, discussion, dialogues disappearing from the public space. But this is what is happening today. And that's why I don't believe that anybody has an actual answer to that question, what are we ready for? Or what are we doing for being ready for? Or how much we are learning from these experiences that Ukraine war presented to the world. Unfortunately, I don't have answers to that, although I follow on a daily basis whatever comes out, but there's so little information coming out that it's impossible to have a real information and knowledge about it.
Yeah, so Shota, even though it's a closed organization, we have some open indicators to argue that nothing like this is happening at the Ministry of Defense. First of all, this is a budget. With this budget, you cannot do some important major systems acquisitions. And the last important acquisition, was when we bought the javelins from the United States and French air defense system. And actually, it was in 2000. It ended. The process of the procurement ended in 2019, which means that after that, no major procurements. When it comes to drones, if you look at the budget of our Delta, which is one of the institutions of the Ministry of Defense working on research and development, you can find out that it's impossible to do any important things there also. In addition to this, if you look at what is the states, what is the priority of the Ministry of Defense? If you need to understand this, you have to look some national level conceptual documents, and everybody knows who is monitoring and watching the Georgia in this regard, that national security concept adopted in 2011. Of course, outdated. National defense strategy, never ever adopted. National threat assessment document. We had this document from 2014 until 2017, outdated.
Yeah, it was 15.
And some others also. You cannot find any, policy priorities based on which you can assume that country and its defense goes in this direction.
Right. There is another important question about the trust to the armed forces, which, Giorgi, you mentioned was historically very high, and church and military are always consistently polling on top of the most trusted institutions in Georgia. Do you know if this massive volumes of Russian disinformation amplified by the ruling party actually has changed it somehow? Because the narratives about about peace and war has been the leading, narrative in that disinformation campaigns, saying that the spillover of the war in Ukraine and in dragging Georgia into that war is the possibility, and blaming our partners in attempting to do that. Did that somehow affect the credibility of armed forces or popularity of the institution thereof?
We don't have updated data, but I'm sure that no, because for us, this trust comes from we look at the defense institution or military as a symbolic thing, symbol of Georgia's independence, like church or like, I don't know, Georgian museums. And don't forget also that in that, I don't know, other institutions like Ministry of, the judicial system, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, I'm sure that they also lost the trust. So we can assume that the military is still the one of the most trusted organizations.
But
Okay,
there is
so-
a very important point, Shota, in your question that that needs to be articulated. I think what GD is doing, especially after the brutal war started in Ukraine, is that their propaganda machinery constantly talks about or brings these questions for discussion, like, oh, okay, we do have army, but why do we need this army? What is this army gonna do? Are they gonna defeat Russians if there is a large scale invasion in Georgia again? What good does it serve? Why do we spend so much money? Although we spend very little actually, but still, why do we spend so much money on something that is never gonna work? So these seeds of doubt, these seeds of trouble are there. You hear it constantly. People are talking about the issues that never were discussed in Georgia before. And I'm not saying that there should be any taboos, but what I'm saying basically is that it serves only one purpose: to defeat the whole purpose of what Giorgi just said, that the authority and the trust of Georgia military was based on this one factor, that it was seen as the guardian of the Georgia sovereignty, right? As everywhere, I guess that's the main function of the military, to guard the independence and sovereignty of that particular country. And now, what is GD trying to do by its soft power and by its propaganda machinery is to defeat that argument, basically saying that, well, no, we need to use other instruments because military is no good in protecting this idea of sovereignty that they have, which has actually nothing to do with the sovereignty, but still it's the same terminology that they use with completely different context.
Right. Okay, so I see four very interesting questions. I'll try to summarize them in the cluster of two questions. One internal Georgia-oriented, and another one related to United States and Georgia's cooperation in military and its future. So I will start with the internal one, and I'll try to layer this as I read it through the questions. One aspect of the question is, how much is the overall deficiencies of the political system and the structure, like corruption, like the top-down approach and the over government oriented and centric vision of the defense and security, and this top-down approach to building something like national defense and security in the political system that is very far from being free, fair, or oriented on the national interests. How does that affect our chances to basically have this right at some point in time? And what are those main deficiencies in your understanding that prevents us from moving ahead in building credible defense forces and power within the country? Is it in direct correlation with good governance and democracy, or basically it's not directly related to that?
Yeah, I think it is very much it is very much about the good governance and democracy and what's the word? The efficient governance that is lacking so much.
I think
But
a
yeah.
little bit of controversy here, just well, authoritarian regimes, they can have very strong armies. I mean, and they do have very strong armies, and they control those armies, and they make sure that they use it for the purposes in the way they see their national interests. But that's not happening in our case.
No, because our model of governance, whatever model they have, I don't even know if it is correct to call it any model of governance, but whatever institutional setup Georgian Dream proposed to the Georgian people has these two variables. Yes, it is autocracy, but at the same time, it's not an independent autocracy. And this is why the military component is missing. So it's not like North Korean type of autocracy or Iranian type of autocracy or dictatorship where you have a government running state in its own dictatorial way, but at the same time is building up military capacities to defend it from outside forces, like for example Venezuela doing, because they knew that US was an enemy, so they were in this constant build up to defend themselves. The problem of the Georgian government today is that they've lost the notion of enemy. They consider enemy as their most important ally. And then, obviously, the whole idea of building an army is absent, because why do you need an army? Or why do you need, it's not even about the army. Why do you need the Giorgi was saying, we don't even have a new national security concepts or any major security and defense related institutional strategic documents. Exactly because of that reason. Because if you have a document like that, you need to define very clear lines. You need to put everything under the certain titles, right? Enemies, friends, allies, what kind of military infrastructure you are building, compatibility with NATO, interoperability. All these issues need to be discussed there. And that's the danger for the Georgian Dreams type of governance model that they propose. That's why we are in this situation when, on the one hand, yes, you have all the signs of the autocracy that should be absolutely building this defense fortress, but it is not, because the enemy against whom this defense fortress needs to be built is seen as an ally.
Giorgi, another layer to this is basically, again, coming back to the role of society and the role of the military leadership, which, as we know, has been educated and has been fighting, shoulder to shoulder with their NATO and European allies, and there is no way their mind shift could have transformed and undergone that change to be recipient of that pro-Russian propaganda that we hear for now. So at what point do you see that we will not have to wait for the government, to allow us to have more role in this. But as a society and the military leadership, we have to request and demand somehow a policy on defense and security, which most of the Georgians think is appropriate at this point in time. So do you see any signs of this, or what would be the good indicator or precipitating event to this?
Very difficult question, Shota.
That's from the audience. That's not me.
Follow or unfollow unlawful, for if you consider unlawful orders. This type of discussions is at the moment ongoing in the United States, for example. And should you send National Guard somewhere in states, or there are some, and I remember at the National Defense University, of course, we had this type of ethical dilemmas in our seminars, and we discussed this, etc., etc. I remember how those answers from culture to culture were different. I mean, and including Georgian officers, they were much conservative, I would say, than the Europeans and Americans. But even in the United States, again, it's not the straightforward thing. What can you do when you are getting this type of unlawful order? As I said, in Georgia, it is difficult. So what is going at the moment in the armed forces of Georgia, it's obviously they are losing the autonomy they had during before the war started in Ukraine, let's say, and especially they gained as this authority when Afghanistan mission was ongoing. So how they gained this authority? They were participating in international missions, which means that they had almost every day some type of cooperation with their Western partners. And at that time, politicians decided not to, intervene in very operational and tactical issues within the Ministry of Defense. But now, once the political situation is tense, I have the so I have the information from the ministry, of course, that minister and ministry, they decided to intervene everywhere at the tactical levels as well, and they do this via state security service and via general inspector and via military police that they have there. Plus, they are somehow trying to find some type of to buy this loyalty from the high level officers. So in order to control military, you don't have to control everybody. You have in 25,000 something army, you should control 80 or 70 high level officers, and then you can control everything.
Yeah, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you in your final statements to cover the current state of affairs of U.S.-Georgia military cooperation. We know that the Charter on Strategic Partnership has been posed, and we see this, unprecedented cooling of relations between the countries. To your knowledge, to what extent does that also affect military cooperation, which has been one of the main backbones of U.S.-Georgia relations traditionally? And what kind of hope do you have in the future relations? What would it take to restore normal relations between Georgia and the United States?
Well, I think together with the pause of the strategic cooperation, what we've seen for facts is that military drills have been also canceled, right? And that's the most painful. That was the most painful decision when I've heard it first time for me, because so much effort was put in 2014, Shota, you remember, and Giorgi as well, when we were studying it, and there was so much optimism and hope of actually using it for the benefits of the army. And then after in short 10 years, we have it all canceled, not only paused, but basically canceled, and it's tragic. I don't know if there are any behind the doors talks going on between the Pentagon and the Georgia Ministry of Defense. I hope there is still some communication going on. We know that there are some small portions of financial assistance still coming to Georgia in the military, and that's only good. Whatever troubles Georgia goes politically, we need to keep this cooperation alive because it will be very difficult to to start from zero. This is not the world today that we are. Any country, and especially a country like Georgia, has a comfort of breaking up totally with the US or with NATO for that matter, and European Union allies as well. Because in this troubled world, staying isolated like we are right now, only means only trouble and more suffering than any positive developments in a country. Well, we'll see how things will develop. There is a certain promise that we hear from Tbilisi. Not that much was said by Washington so far, but I would expect that if there is any revitalization of the Georgia-US cooperation, that will be primarily through military cooperation. Because that was the strongest, that's the oldest, that was the institutionally most significant one. And I think that it will be easiest starting point for recharging this cooperation and this relationship that was halted for over 3 years now. But very little optimism there. Unfortunately, the only possibility for anything actually happening is if, for strange reasons, tomorrow Georgian government will come up with this positive agenda of reforms and change and complete reversal of everything that they are doing starting from 2022. Do we expect it happening? I don't think so. Without that, there is a very little chance that anything can revitalize.
Thank you, Tina. Giorgi, very quickly, do you have the numbers of the ongoing assistance? I mean, is that 100 million on your slide still something that is flowing through the current budgetary cycle? If you are aware of that?
As far as I know, no. At the moment, no. And as I said earlier, again, Ministry of Defense and the military in Georgia is not the primary enabler for the regime to capture the government. And because of that, the US can feel comfortable to cooperate with them as much as possible. This is our position, and I'm sure that Tina also said the same thing. Even though I understand that the regime and political class in Georgia, political current government, they will try to instrumentalize this type of cooperation with them. For example, Ministry of Defense, he's very happy when he appears in the meetings in Germany, for example, in this Ukraine group, to support Ukraine. They are not doing there. They don't do anything there, but still they love to be there and
the pictures.
Yes. In the pictures, yeah. But we can I don't know. We need to keep this cooperation alive.
Thank you, Giorgi. Over to you, Salome.
Thank you all so much for this engaging conversation, even though the end is not so optimistic as I hear it. But I think the history that we are coming from gives us a cause to think positively. And you may know tomorrow we are kicking off a week of Georgian days in Washington, D.C. in the run-up of the Independence Day. And it's important for us because the Georgian Association, which is founded in 1932, one of the enduring traditions that the association had with the diaspora here was to continue to celebrate independence of Georgia even during the time that Georgia was occupied and was under the Soviet Union. So it's a really important activity that we're doing to continue highlighting that independent, democratic Georgia is what that has no alternative, and that's what our ancestors fought for. That's what our armed forces fought for, and we thank them for their service. And we invite everybody to join us starting tomorrow here in Washington, D.C. at the American University. We have a concert kicking it off. Then throughout the week, we have a couple of different activities. And here on the screen, there are additional resources from Civic Idea that we invite everyone to look at, as well as our bookshelf, which has recommended readings that our participants in the panels usually recommend. So please keep suggesting our additional readings for folks who didn't get quite enough depth for today. And lastly, next webinar will be on June 13th at 1 p.m. and we're going to talk about migration, which kind of rounds out our sessions for this academic year with a topic that's very much current, as our panelists also talked about. Even our military leadership has migrated out of Georgia, so it's very much something that's top of mind for us as a diaspora organization. So without further ado, thank you so much again for everyone who attended, and thank you again for our speakers for a fascinating, engaging conversation. Thank you, Ambassador Gvineria, for hosting, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody next time.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you for
Have a
the
great day.
opportunity and for putting everything together. Tina, Giorgi, thank you very much. It was wonderful.
And everyone
catching up with you.
backstage.
Yes,
Thank you.
everyone in backstage. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.